No, this is, let me bring this up here. Come on. There you go. The Garden of Peace. A marital guide for men only. Notice the two white doves. This is the female. In Kabbalah, this would be called the female aspect. It's in the nest. Coming down to her is the male aspect. This metaphor, it's very interesting. It has a little bit of Kabbalic implication. This is a marital guide. But what's interesting about it is it says this is for men only. Now this Rabbi Arush, been doing, I haven't met him. I really don't know what he looks like. Maybe I'll try to find his picture. That would be a nice thing to bring over here. 1 second. Okay, I'd like to bring it, but I don't know how to do it, so therefore I'm not going to do it yet. I will find that picture. So he writes like this, and he begins this marital guide, and what I was going to say is he says that this is for men only. I read this book. I told you, it made a big difference in my marriage. To understand what my role is, and to understand what my wife's role is. Using Kabbalah and being able to understand the relationships between men and women is helpful, really, really helpful. He's going to help us. But I said that, see that through the book, he understands, and like I say in astrology, that your natural enemy is your husband or wife. So here he says that there are very serious problems in many, many marriages. And I guess like a policeman who always sees crime, when you're a marriage counselor, a rabbi who specializes in getting people together in Shalom, he sees it all the time. He sees the strife and the pain. So let's see what this is about to say and try to understand and maybe be a little bit critical of what he says if we can. The most important mitzvah. He writes, know full well the most important thing in the service of Hashem is Shalom Bayit, peace in the home. Here a husband must invest all his efforts, for this is a mitzvah that obligates him the entire days of his life. Now remember that he's writing this for men only. As long as a person lacks a peaceful marriage, then he must devote as much as he can to learning about praying for and achieving Shalom Bayit. Common misconception is that attending to a wife's needs is a waste of time, especially Torah learning time. The opposite is true. Shalom Bayit is a person's most important mitzvah, a barometer of his service to Hashem, his lifelong project, and his real test in life. Now this book, this whole idea should be taught to young people before they're married. I don't know if they are. I was never in that situation. So listen to his ideas. Try to get this a little bit better focus here. There we go. Remaining single. One's objective in life is to cling to Hashem, His Torah, and His commandments. Apparently, it's easier to do so as a bachelor without the yoke of a wife, children, and livelihood. If so, one could surmise that Hashem would want us to remain single, so we could serve Him with no outside interference. Even the Gemara says that a married man has a millstone around his neck, in other words, a formidable burden. Yet the reality is that Hashem doesn't want us to remain single. Hashem punished Aaron's sons, Nadav and Abihu, because they didn't take wives and marry, even though they were, according to the Zohar, righteous men on the level of Moshe Rabbeinu. King Hezekiah, a pious and upright sage with the soul of Moshiach, in whose merit all of Israel learned Torah, received a heavenly death sentence because he hadn't yet taken a wife. The sentence was only rescinded when he quickly married Isaiah's daughter. This leads us to ask, why is it so important to get married? Why were those that didn't marry punished so severely? Nadav, Avihu, and Hezekiah simply wanted to fulfill the mitzvah and learn Torah without any disturbances. To cling to Hashem and to enjoy the sublime spiritual delights of the next world and this world. So why does Hashem require a person to marry? Doesn't the mitzvah of taking a wife and providing for all her needs tie a person down to this lowly material world? Now in Kabbalah, this is the concept of the Vav. The concept in Kabbalah is, let me see if then I can stabilize this a little bit. It's the concept of the Vav, which has the ability to communicate with the He, which represents Bina, the higher level, the spiritual level, the level beyond, and the lower He, which is Malchus, all the physical things, all the plannings that women must go through and all of this. The man would refer to being Bina, where everything is lofty, great ideas, communication with God. But here the answer, the purpose of creation, one's observance of Torah and attaining a tikkun or correction of the soul, can only be achieved within the context of a marital relationship in a peaceful home. Therefore, marriage is senseless without Shalom Bayit, peace in the home. Without marital peace, why marry? Why commit transgressions and make your wife miserable? Since one can observe the Torah fully and attain the tikkun only as a married man, if he doesn't get married, he renders himself superfluous in the world. Even worse, the world can be fully corrected. It cannot be fully corrected if the individual doesn't fulfill his purpose. Let's elaborate. So he gave the idea right there that this is a world of tikkun, a world where we can get rebuild the kedusha that the world really needs. Let's elaborate, he says, on the above concept. With the help of the two following parables, which describe situations that each one of us can relate to, the Holy Celibate Shlita. So he's going to write this. In the earliest days, the Holy Celibate Shlita had decided that his soul yearns for Torah. He concluded that his very best move would be to remain single and to find a secluded house of study where he could devote the days of his life to Torah and to divine service. Soon, the Holy Celibate Shlita discovered a tiny clapboard synagogue in a rural village far off the beaten track. He asked permission for the local beadle to eat. The beadle means the gabbai, to eat, sleep, and drink within the confines of the synagogue, which also served as the village house of study. He solemnly promised not to disturb a stall. The beadle agreed. The Holy Celibate Shlita would quietly sit in the corner, learning day and night with no disturbance or interruption. He barely left the house of study. He limited his food intake to a few dry crusts of bread. Denying himself any semblance of bodily pleasure, he drank water from the tap and slept on a hard wooden bench. Now, I know a lot of people like this, maybe not, but significant people in my life. Days, months, and years transpired in this manner, until the fateful day when the beadle, that is the gabbai, found the elderly Holy Celibate Shlita lying lifeless on the floor of the synagogue. The entire village escorted the Holy Celibate Shlita on the way to his final resting place. They couldn't find adequate words to express his holiness and asceticism. All the villagers were certain that such an individual, totally withdrawn and aloof from anything mundane, was surely a great tzaddik. In fact, the Holy Celibate Shlita agreed with the villagers. He really thought that he was a tzaddik, of lofty merits, and his soul ascended to the heavenly court. He was certain that he'd be greeted by an honor guard of history's great tzaddikim playing lyres and cymbals, accompanied by a choir of archangels, singing in 6-part harmony. He was positive that they'd be escorting him to the right station beneath the heavenly throne to bask in the sublime light of the divine presence. Now, this is really a powerful story. The Holy Celibate Shlita suffered a horrifying shock of disappointment. No souls of the great Tzaddikim arrived to greet him. He didn't hear any angels playing music in his honor. All he saw were the images of his parents and ancestors standing in front of him with dejected countenances. Without any further delay, he was ushered into the heavenly courtroom, where he stood before the tribunal of very stern-looking tzaddikim. The Chief Justice opened a large volume, the life story of the Holy Celibate Shlita. He reviewed all of the Holy Celibate Shlita's mitzvahs, and then addressed him by his first name, ignoring the dignified title of Holy Celibate Shlita. The Chief Justice said, "Yaske, you learned quite a bit of Torah. You prayed, you made the necessary blessings, you put on tefillin daily, and you wore tzitzis. You observed the Shabbos and the holidays, and you fasted even more than required. In fact, you've done a good job of observing the mitzvahs." This is the problem, though, with all your good deeds. You didn't complete the mission that you were supposed to complete in the physical world. You learned Torah, but you failed to implement what you learned. Had you married, you would have seen how far away you are from the Torah observance, for then you would have had to invest much more effort to fulfill each mitzvah. He's saying here that the path of the celibate is the easy path. Casting a chastising glance at the shocked soul of the Holy Celibate Shlita, the Chief Justice had added, "Didn't you know that the entire purpose of learning Torah was to acquire Amunah? The level of Amunah that you attained is extremely inadequate. Had you married, you'd have been required to face a long list of trials and tribulations with your wife. When she would have hindered your Torah learning with her various demands, you would have failed the test. Whenever she would have belittled or scolded you, we all know this. That's why they have, you don't want to be in the doghouse. That's why they say that phrase. You'd have tarnished your soul with anger and complaining. Only then would you have seen how weak your Amunah really is. You thought you trusted in Hashem, but if you'd been faced with the challenge of providing for a wife and children, you'd have seen just how frail your trust in Hashem really is. Any time you had been faced with a financial problem, you would have had sunk into a state of depression and despair. Now the charges were getting more serious by the minute, but the Chief Justice hadn't yet finished his admonishment of the Holy Celibate Shlita. The minute you'd have earned some money, you'd have developed a lust for money. Then you would have forsaken the Torah while trying to make more money. Trust in Hashem? You were far away from trust. Patience? You never received the test of patience. Indeed, you are intrinsically full of anger and impatience. Good character? Had you married, you'd have seen just how much you really needed to improve, for you never had to compromise with or to give in to another person. Happiness? Maybe you see yourself as a happy person, but had you married, you would have seen how far you actually were from happiness, and even more, how difficult it would have been to make your wife happy. Wow. While listening to all of her daily demands, complaints, and problems, and furthermore, if Hashem would have desired that you only fulfill the mitzvahs between God and man, then he wouldn't have sent your soul on a tour of duty to the lowly world, this material world. Your mission down there was to arrive at the awareness of Hashem and to get to know him. That can only be accomplished in the material world as a married man with all the relevant trials and tribulations. The tribunal therefore concludes, in light of all of the hard facts of your life, that you have failed to fill the vast majority of the mitzvahs between man and fellow man. You never gave of yourself to another person. You never sacrificed a thing for another person. Nor have you ever surrendered your desires to the desires of another person. You have no idea about the meaning of compromise. You've done nothing to uproot or even mitigate your innate egotism. The Chief Justice and the tribunal showed Yaske just how miserably he had failed. Yaske stood in front of the court while the fires of humiliation scorched his soul. He had utterly failed to perform his tikkun. He was forced to realize just how badly he had failed, to understand his task in the world by failing to take a wife. If only he'd have married and raised a family while striving to build a peaceful home. This is Baruch Fleischman. This is a tremendous story brought here by Rabbi Arush. Whoa, let me get back over here. But I'm also thinking that he is an Israeli. He writes in Hebrew, modern Hebrew. Rabbi Lazer Brody, translated this, and it's a brilliant translation. This is Baruch Fleischman. I hope this is helpful. This is for men only. Kol Tov.